How long have I been telling y'all about white fear? The browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. I've been telling y'all that. I published the book in September. I've been discussing this topic for the last 14 years. And all you keep seeing right now is white fear. Now we see it happening in North Carolina, where the North Carolina House, Republicans control, passed a bill, to ban public school teachers from compelling white students to feel guilty or responsible for past actions committed by people of the same race. It passed 68-49, held along party lines, Republican leaders claiming it would help fight discrimination based on race and sex. Really? The bill would require schools to notify the Department of Public Instruction and publish information online before hosting any diversity training or guest speakers who have previously advocated for any beliefs restricted under the legislation. Citizens for Renewing America, a conservative social welfare group founded by a former Trump administration official, drafted a model proposal to rid schools of critical race theory, and the language of North Carolina's bill echoes their proposal. The bill now heads to the Senate for further processing. Now, keep in mind, Republicans also control the Senate, a veto majority, so even if the governor vetoes it, they can override his veto. Now, while that's happening in North Carolina, let's go to Arkansas. Well, the state recently withdrew its approval for the Advanced Placement African American Studies course in the high school curriculum. The Arkansas Department of Education stated concerns that the pilot course, currently undergoing revisions, could potentially put teachers at risk of violating state law. That law is called the LEARNS Act, which includes a ban on teaching critical race theory. While districts still have the option to offer the African American history course independently, there will be no statewide pilot program, and students will not receive any AP credit for the course. The College Board, which offers the system, had previously made changes in response to criticism in Florida, removing topics such as Black Lives Matter, slavery reparations, and queer life from the framework. Now, Arkansas is reportedly working on creating an honors version of the AP African American History course. Now, keep in mind, in Arkansas, they will continue to offer a course on European history and continue to pay for it. So let's see. So we're not going to teach African American history, but we're down with European history that ain't from this particular state. Now remember, what did I warn all of y'all when Christopher Rufo was leading the attacks on critical race theory? What did I tell you? I recall saying that they're going to put anything dealing with race under the banner. Because he said it. That was always their plan. That was always the goal. So they want to lump anything with race, DEI, equity, inclusion, multiculturalism, put everything under it. So all you have to say is, remember, Republicans think in terms of bumper stickers. Critical race theory. And they apply that to everything. Of course, when you ask them to define it, they actually can't. Our panel, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, she is, of course, President Emerita, Bennett College, economist as well. We have Renita Shannon, former Georgia State Representative out of Atlanta. Glad to have both of y'all here. So I'll start with you, Julianne. Again, this is why I'm constantly trying to explain to black simpletons who love to throw around terms, oh, you're a shield, you're just protecting Democrats, oh, you, they try all this nonsense. And I keep saying, y'all can play games, but this is what happens when they take over school boards, when they take over the state house and the state senate and the governor's mansion and the courts. And when you consolidate power, they can make a change, and then it's going to be approved up the ladder, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so what are we seeing? Florida, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arkansas, Louisiana, Virginia. We could just simply get the old Confederate, where white conservatives are in control and they possess the power. This is all connected to politics, Julian.
Absolutely. And it's the old Confederacy, and if you put this in historical context, all of these states had laws on the books in the 19th century. North Carolina, to teach a slave to read is to excite dissatisfaction to the detriment of the general population. That law passed in, I believe, 1831, said that if a white person taught a black person to read, they could be flogged up to 50 stripes. If a black person did it, they could be re-enslaved. They also, in both cases, could be fined. And so when we look at this is not new stuff. What's new is that too many people have sat by quietly and let this happen this second time around with the attacks on critical race theory, with the attacks on teaching. I mean, Roland, how can you make somebody feel guilty? Facts do not make you feel guilty. So we don't want anybody to feel guilty. If you want to feel guilty about any number of things, including the rape of our environment. Now, what if people feel guilty about that? Is that against the law? So we really this has reduced itself to simplicity 101. You're right, these are both black and white simpletons. The black ones bother me the most. These are the black folks who say we should get rid of stop thinking about enslavement, get over enslavement. But enslavement is at the economic foundation of this country, at the absolute economic foundation. So we can go back and look at those laws. As you know, I'm doing this research now on lynching and the connection between lynching and the economy. And you literally, I just came across a headline that said, lynching is bad for business. So these people had decided, well, we'll just lynch a few. We're not going to lynch them all, because if we lynch them all, they won't spend any money. So again, the absurdity just befuddles me, but no, it doesn't befuddle me. This is what, as you said, you laid it out perfectly, Roland. School board to state house to gubernatorial mansion to the White House. That's the continuum, and we see all kinds of ways that truth is being suppressed. And that's what it's about. It's about teaching ignorance, truth being suppressed. What's ironic, Oklahoma is another one of the states. How dare Oklahoma, the site of Black Wall Street, decide that you can't teach truth? North Carolina, that you can't teach truth. But if you teach truth, then people may know what's going on. I'll say one last thing. In Illinois, they have students on the Board of Education. And through Push Excel, Reverend Jackson's education arm, which I chair, we basically have 2 Illinois school principals on Push Excel. They had a webinar with young people, and a young white girl said, it's just as important for me to know algebra as it is for me to know Black history. Our young people are not rejecting this. These are old fools who are rejecting this, and we should keep that in mind.
But here's the thing, Renita, and again, I try to explain to people, all of this stuff is also in response to 2020 and the death of George Floyd. I keep trying to get people to understand, white folks freaked out when they saw how their white kids were responding to police brutality. And so what you see this visceral reaction against the 1619 Project. You see this visceral reaction against anybody, the Jane Elliots of the world, the Tim Wises of the world. You see this visceral reaction to anybody who is now talking about the rest of American history and not that sanitized, tainted version that too many of us have been taught for years in our schools. And so what they recognize is that we have got to keep these white kids from actually learning about what happened. We can't have these white kids learning about the Wilmington Massacre. And then we can't have these white kids learning about the 92 years of Jim Crow after the Great Compromise of 1877. We can't have any of that. And so in order for you to raise up a generation of people to be like their previous generation, the easiest thing to do is to stop them from learning.
These bills should be concerning for every person who pays taxes in this country, no matter what state you live in. Because as you mentioned, these bills are flying up across the country. You left out Georgia. Georgia also passed a bill similar to this about 2 years ago. At that point, I was still in the legislature. And I just remember the language for all of these bills as they were flying up is completely ambiguous. And so a lot of it does boil down to stuff like, oh, well, you can't make white kids feel bad. The reason why this is important is because this is your tax dollars going right down the drain. Bills like this are very ambiguous. They don't stand up in court because what does that mean? That you can't teach anything that will make a white child feel guilty. And so what ends up happening is these bills get challenged in court, and now you're spending more tax dollars to fight them. But the important thing is, as we are all kind of talking about, every parent should be livid about this, regardless of race, because we know that culture more and more is being used to sell products today. Companies are more and more concerned about not just centering white culture, but intentionally centering Black culture. And that's because they know that we are an economic buying force. Companies are now more sensitive to what it is that we want to see in the ways that we are reflected. And if you don't understand our history, you are not going to be able to understand how to speak to us. And so why should this matter to parents? It matters because your kids will not be able to get a job, period, point blank, if they cannot understand how to operate in a multi-ethnic country. And Black folks are a large part of that. We are a growing sector of economics. And so what this is going to do, no matter what the race of your child is, if these kids, Black kids are going to get taught it at home. Everything I know about Black and Black culture got told to me from my parents and my family members, and having friends also who were Black. White kids are not going to have this knowledge that is going to be essential for their future earning potential. And it's all going to be because, as you said, there are a bunch of too many old white men in government who this is their agenda to erase our history. This is their agenda to not to have to hear about what it takes to be sensitive to folks' culture. This is all their agenda. But as you pointed out, young folks are interested in information. The 1619 Project, when it came out on Hulu, was widely watched. And even though people tried to tear it down, people are very interested in the 1619 Project, and that's not the only one. And so the more that they try to push back and say, hey, you can't have access to this information, we all know what that does. That just drives young folks to want it even more.
See, again, people have to understand the play, Julian. You have all of these think tanks, you have all of these conservative groups being funded by conservative billionaires, the exact same conservative billionaires that's funding the Daily Caller, the Daily Signal, the Daily Wire, that's funding Breitbart and all these conservative media outlets. These are the same people who are funding campaigns, and so they're all linked. And so when we are talking about this and trying to respond to it, we have to understand they're all interrelated. And so then you have their legal arm, which is the Fairless Society. And so what is their goal? Let's get federal judges who think like they do, who then will make sure they outlaw these teachings. And so what you do is you now put the policymakers in office. You now put the judges in office. So you use your power to now infiltrate the system, because in their minds, oh, we've got to stop the liberal indoctrination. And what they call liberal indoctrination is actually truth-telling. They do not want the truth actually told about lynching, about slavery, about post-slavery, about the economic theft of land from Black people in this country. They do not want any of that stuff told, because when you actually tell people the truth, they go, well, damn, I see why these Black people are pissed off. I see why they're angry. And that is the goal.
You know, Roland, 44 states have introduced legislation to prevent the teaching of so-called critical race theory or ethnic studies or something along those lines. And again, the ignorance is such that it's all put into one bucket. Critical race theory, which is a legal concept, as we know. This is not something that's being taught K through 12. It's not even being taught widely in undergraduate education. You put critical race theory in with ethnic studies, which is extremely important. We need ethnic studies. And then you put it in with all this other DEI training, which we're not doing DEI training at the K through 12 level either. So you throw it all together, and basically the common denominator is let's not talk about race because there's too much baggage that we carry for talking about race. As I said, the young people that I know are very open. In the state of California, Roland, in order to graduate from a community college, by 5 years it'll be K through 12. K through 12, a community college or a Cal State. In order to graduate, you must take ethnic studies. You must take at least one ethnic studies class. But, you know, there's always that little rump group of people who don't like it. They don't want to have anything shoved down their throat. And then we also get the diluters who would, was at a meeting with someone who teaches women's poetry, dig this. So she has one section on Maya Angelou, and she thinks that should count for ethnic studies. My response, oh, hell no. Actually, that's not my job anymore, but at the time that it was, I was ensuring that we make sure that ethnic studies is ethnic studies. But these people want to turn the clock back. If we look at the nearly 5,000 lynchings that took place in our country, we'll find out that many of them had to do with economics. They had to do with property. They had nothing to do with interracial sex, which is what lots of people like to say. That whole birth of the nation trope that black men were hungry for white women. In fact, as Ida B. Wells says, it was probably the other way around. But in any case, that's a story that they don't want to tell. And so you continue the notion of savagery. And understand that the basis of lynching is savagery. You have to make someone inhuman to be willing to light them on fire. And many of our lynchings were accompanied by lighting people on fire. So, no, this is not a story they want to be told, but it's a story that must be told. And so we have to start pushing very, very hard. Many people have been. You know, kudos to Dr. Shirley Weber, who's the Secretary of State in California, who was a professor at San Diego State and who was author of some of this ethnic studies legislation. Kudos to her, but we need a Shirley Weber in the legislature in every state.
But see, again, I think that what our responsibility here, Renita, is to get people to understand how these things are interrelated. I posted something today where I said, with what's happening in Arkansas and North Carolina, no black person should remotely vote for the Republican Party. Somebody responded, they said, well, I know a bunch of black folks, and they say it's about jobs. Okay. We were employed during Jim Crow. But it doesn't mean we should have not fought Jim Crow. We were employed during slavery for free. See, so if you try to reduce this thing, and this is what I'm trying to get people to understand, you cannot be voting solely on, well, my taxes are low. No, you look at this thing in a broad way. It's no different than when I try to walk these people through, trying to get them to understand. I love these people who claim they support reparations, but then they trash Democrats, but never say there's not one Republican federally that supports reparations. And then they say, well, you're a shield. All you do is providing cover for Democrats. And I then go, so can you explain to me politically how you're going to get reparations if the House has to vote and the Senate has to vote and the president has to sign it? Oh, by the way, there's going to be a lawsuit. So if you don't vote or you don't care, then if you don't have federal judges in place who are going to hear the said lawsuit, then you're going to lose. So you might get it through the House, you might get it through the Senate, you might get it to the presidency, but then what then happens if it sues and you lose in court because you didn't vote for Democrats who are likely going to support judges who are more down with civil rights and human rights, things along those lines. And so then I look at that particular person and go, now, with all that said, what the hell are you talking about? And they literally cannot get out of that pretzel, and that's how dumb this is. I was walking somebody through the other day trying to explain to them, because somebody said to me, well, I don't understand, how are you supporting Biden and Harris? I said, well, let's do the math. There are more than 100 judges that have been appointed. You have judges that have literally gone from defense attorneys or from the ACLU, or from other civil rights groups, directly to the federal bench. I said, so by the end of the Biden-Harris first term, they probably are going to appoint around 150 judges. If Biden and Harris is reelected, then let's say they get another 150 judges. We're now at 300. So let's say another Democrat wins in 2028, and they get to appoint 150 judges. That means now, with 3 administrations, we're sitting at 450 federal judges. There are only about 930 or so federal judges in the country, which means that if you have 3 consecutive Democratic presidents, then they will appoint half of the federal judiciary. And if you have 3 consecutive Democratic presidents, that means that you are likely going to be able to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices. Alito and Clarence Thomas are the 2 oldest, and they're in their early to mid 70s. The math is the math. And so when you look at the existing Supreme Court, most of the existing Supreme Court, out of the total of 9, were appointed under Republican presidents. The math is the math. And so people have to understand, you cannot be stuck on stupid and sit out an election, because if you are trying to play long ball or trying to play chess like the right is, then you understand why you should be maximizing your power to prevent the seeding of this far right-wing constituency on the local, state, and federal level.
Democrats should not be in the business of telling anybody that the way they think is stupid or that they need to change their perspective. I never won any of my elections by doing that to folks. What we need to do is meet people where they are and show them how we are better. So let's take your example. People who are saying it's all about the jobs. Great, let's start there. In this instance, what we are talking about right now, not being taught proper history, not being taught African-American history in school, not being taught anything that's going to make white kids feel bad, will ruin job prospects for you. That is a job killer. That is equivalent in today's economy as almost saying, let's not teach kids math. These are things that you have to know. And why? Because there's almost no job out there that racial sensitivity or knowing how to talk with people and get along with people, whether you are a small business owner or whether you're going to work for an employer, there are almost no jobs out there that don't include some of this. Think about it. Even if you just want to do landscaping, even if you want to start a landscaping business, you're going to have to talk to customers. And if you are not able to understand Black folks' culture with the amount of buying power that we do have, you are just not going to do as well. And large corporations will not want to hire you. There's almost no direction you can go for legal work where this does not matter. And I would say probably even for illegal work. And so we need to meet voters where they are and break it down for them and show them very simply why all of this should matter for them and their children. So this is about the jobs, and we need to be saying how much of a job killer this is. For all those folks who believe that China and other countries are about to take over, and the extra racist white folks who feel like, oh, immigrants are getting our jobs. Well, what kind of education are they getting in other countries? Because in this country, every day, more and more kids are being told they can't learn about this, they can't learn about that. All of that does nothing but set up a situation where American children will not be able to compete in a global space where employers can get candidates for work and get employees anywhere they want to. A lot of the jobs are internet-based now. It happened during COVID, and folks decided, hey, this is a lot cheaper not to have whole buildings for people to have to come and work in. My employee can actually work from home, and all that did was broaden the pool of employees that employers have access to. And so now the competition has only gotten stiffer, not easier, and you need to have every single tool in your tool belt in order to get the job that you want. And so what I would say is all of this is making our children not smarter. It is making us less competitive in the job market that is getting increasingly more global and more diverse.
Well, again, it's understanding, again, this entire map and how it all connects.